Welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Bruen, and here this week, a very special guest, big part of New England for quite some time, and we haven't seen him in a while. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Arch Kincaid. Thank you so much for joining us.
Joseph, it's absolutely a delight to be on your podcast. I've watched several episodes and you're doing an amazing job. It's so informative, entertaining, professional, but also very authentic. So superior work.
Really appreciate that, and it's great to have you here. Very excited to have you here this week. You don't do many, if any, interviews, so this is great to have you and kind of take a deep dive into your career.
I'm looking forward to it.
So let's rewind to the very beginning. You know, growing up as a child, a young adult, when did you first discover pro wrestling? Who were some of your favorites when you did?
So I would say that in 1984, I started to become aware of pro wrestling. I lived in Westchester, New York, in a small suburb named Bronxville. So WWF came on Channel 9, WOR, out of Secaucus. And then also, I believe, on Channel 5, which was a Fox affiliate at that time. It was kind of before Fox became gigantic. And then also, we had AWA wrestling on for a period on WPIX, Channel 11. So there was a lot of good wrestling to become aware of. But 1984, I would say.
Nice. A good year to get involved. And, you know, that's when things were just starting for the World Wrestling Federation as far as, large scale events that we would see, just a year later, obviously WrestleMania 1. So a great time to get in as a fan.
Absolutely. Not having cable TV, I remember being aware of this. And it wasn't sort of like a Keaton family from Family Ties situation where the family just wanted to watch PBS, but my father worked for ABC, so he wanted us to watch basically network television. Maybe when ABC bought ESPN, he was thinking maybe we should get cable, but I don't know. So I remember maybe the war to settle the score. Mr. T, Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper and Hulk Hogan, and sort of seeing those things that somebody had taped from MTV. And then I also really, really remember being aware that WrestleMania 1 is occurring, and I'm just not watching it. I'm
Right.
at home. It's going on, and I am unable to access it. The other thing is that if you lived in that area and had cable, you would have had the MSG network, which put all the WWF events that were on at the Garden on TV. So often I would see tapes of that, but never live. I did have the benefit of Warner Wolf, though. He was the CBS affiliate Channel 2, and he would actually, cover the events. So the next night, or if it was a Saturday night, he would pick it up Monday evening and show, video. He would say, let's go to the videotape and show stuff from the Garden. So I got a lot of it, but not always the way that I wish I had it back then.
And
There
would
was
you ever?
longing, but we can't all have everything that we want.
Sure, exactly. Would you ever attend events in person, live and in person, prior to getting into the business?
So, as a child, we were very lucky. We had sort of a schedule. We would get to go to one New York Giants game every fall. We would get to go see a Knicks game in the winter. We would probably see 2 to 3 Yankees games. And then we would go and watch tennis at the US Open. And that was sort of, my father took us to these events, and that was sort of, that was as much as he was going to do. Often he would get tickets from ABC where he worked, and the idea of going to adding something else and going to see wrestling, which he wasn't a huge fan of. Didn't object to it, but it wasn't sport. So finally, I wore him down. And for WrestleMania 3 and 4, he took me to the Westchester Community College in Valhalla, New York, and we watched it on the closed circuit.
Wow.
But I did not see a live pro wrestling event until my freshman year in college.
And what was your father's take on both of those events, not being a big wrestling fan himself?
I think he was happy to spend the afternoon with me. I will say he did enjoy Ricky the Dragon Steamboat against the Macho Man Randy Savage in WrestleMania 3. Like many did. He just said the athleticism of these two gentlemen is off the charts. And had they chosen to be pro football players or baseball players, I guess actually Randy Savage tried that. They could excel because the athleticism he could just rate was off the charts. So he appreciated that match, certainly.
So, at what point did you decide that this was something that you wanted to give a go and maybe give it a try and get into the business yourself? And when you did decide to do that, kind of tell us about your training and how you actually literally did it.
So I was really into it in college, and college was again kind of where we had the resurgence of the NWO, although I liked the Four Horsemen much better, and I just loved it, and I was really in terrible shape at the time when I would go out to drink, which was really probably 4 to 5 nights a week. I would have my button down. I'd have a button down shirt. I have a pocket right here, and in this pocket we had a pack of Camel Lights, a lighter, and my asthma inhaler. So I was really not in good shape. But sometime I want to say very, very late in 1997, I decided that instead of just being kind of obsessed with this, I needed to start to get in shape so that maybe I could indeed give it a go. I was thinking at first maybe I could possibly be a manager, but then I said there's only just a small amount of managers and more wrestlers, so I just started lifting weights. And I remember in the beginning, one of my good friends saw me at the gym at Bates College where I went. And he was just like, "You really are a disgrace to all." He was joking, but to all of us who are really trying to improve their health and fitness. And so it got a lot of that. But then, continuing to work out and lift weights when I came back my senior year in that fall, people were like, "Oh, wow, something's going on here. He's bench pressing a lot of weight and he still kind of looks a little bit tubby. I mean, he's tubby, but he's starting to look stronger. Something is going on."
Wow.
And that year, um, so I think my second pro wrestling show that I went to may have been to see WCW also in college, but I do recall my senior year. I think it was maybe EWA. I may have the initials wrong, but it was at the Lewiston Armory, and I saw Delicious Dave Vicious, and I saw Master Sandy, and I saw Slick Wagner Brown. And later on, he admitted that for that show, he was wearing a shirt that he had bought in the boys department, just to look more jacked. I mean, he was
Yeah.
getting bigger, but he was still just a young, very young. And I thought that was so funny, and he laughed about that too.
So, you'd go on to your actual training. Why don't you tell us about the training regimen to get involved in the business?
So in June of 1999, my friend Gary joined me and we went and we looked at Killer Kowalski's Institute of Professional Wrestling. I had written to them and I had got something back from Walter and I'd called Mike Hollow and he said that Rick the Model Martel would be the guest speaker on June something or other. Maybe that would be a fun time to go check out the school. So we did, and it was amazing to listen to him. And then um, maybe early February of 2000, I just sort of, I went back there, and I had introduced myself to Walter before, but again, and I said, would it be okay if I just observed some of the action? I said, I assure you, sir, I will be quiet. And he said, okay. And then after watching maybe 4 or 5 training sessions, I spoke to him again and said, I would like to do this. And he said, cash. And I said, oh, for the tuition, you mean? And he said, cash. And I said, oh, absolutely. You don't want a credit card. Is it check okay, or do you mean cash? And he said, cash.
Wow.
I may be exaggerating, but I do remember that. And then I remember taking cash out of the ATM. And I think at that time, maybe there was a $300 limit per day. So, sort of being like, okay, I need to do this again. And then to make, maybe the first payment and then the next payment. Um, but yeah, but then got right in there, and the training was excellent. When Mike Hollow was there, fantastic. Walter was great also, but one thing was that you could have been wrestling for 3 days or for 3 years, and you're still new to him. So I definitely preferred the days when Mike Hollow was there, which was most of the time, but sometimes he wouldn't be there, maybe on the weekends, and it would just be Walter. And in that beginning time, I remember maybe it was my third class, and we're doing snap mares over the top rope out on, and I think if you're an athletic person and you're natural, probably it wouldn't be a problem. But obviously I was not. And I remember going out to the floor and then kind of falling back, and the ring apron in the middle and between the posts at Kowalski School um, had a support beam there, and I remember hitting the back of my head and being like, "Oh, I hope my collar comes back soon, so he knows that I'm not ready for that." But that was really just very very small deviation from the norm, because Walter was also awesome and taught me so much and fabulous. But just every now and then, he's new.
Sure. And who were some of the other trainees during that same time period that you were kind of in the same class with?
Well, Wagner had been training there for a while, and he was very, very helpful to me. So was Louis Ortiz, was very helpful to me. Aaron Stevens had been training there for a couple of years. He was also very helpful to me. Um, you also had the Boston Brawler, Jerry Bowser he trained there, but he sort of had a kind of he was a little bit older, and I don't know that he thought that he was going to just make it in pro wrestling, giving his age. So he really gave back and was very very helpful with everyone. Jim McCarthy, Duke Dalton also. Trying to think, some of the other trainees would have been Hurricane John Walters, Good Time Vince Vicalo, Jimmy Jacked Cash. So that was kind of a core group there at the beginning. I'm sure that I'm forgetting somebody, but perhaps that person will emerge in my head shortly. Big Mike Stud, Scarecrow, Chris Angers. Um, okay, I'll let you steer the ship now,
Yeah.
Joseph.
Yeah, it's a lot of great talent right there, and a lot of stars who would go on to great things in the New England scene. So, it's great to hear that there was so much success coming out of that particular class. And Mike Hollow, you got to give it to Mike Hollow. I mean, one of the greats when it comes to training. I think that he's top tier, and I don't really think that there is anybody better, in my opinion. He is as good as it gets for trainers.
Absolutely superior. Again, I don't have some wide range of things to compare it to, but as far as somebody who is a long-term coach, absolutely amazing. I mean, maybe Dr. Tom Pritchard in maybe shorter stints, maybe people would say he's the best of all time, but Mike Hollow, given the longevity, is definitely right up there. Fantastic,
Yeah.
fantastic.
So 2001, you'd go on to Chaotic Wrestling against El Mascarado, Bert Centeno, somebody who had some time in the WWF for many years as an enhancement talent, and of course, wrestled in all different countries. Puerto Rico for quite some time. What was it like working with Bert Centeno? What was he like in and outside of the ring?
Well, obviously, picking up on your lead here, the kayfabe is kind of gone. But I remember in my match, first of all, Bert was great. But doing my promo, and I said, "You see, Norberto Centeno." That was how I started. And he started, "No, El Mascarado," and it was as if he was just interrupting me. So then I had to say it again, louder. "You see, Norberto Centeno," and then he started interrupting. So I had to say it louder. He obviously was trying to keep his identity hidden, but I had a promo to do, and he kept interrupting me. So then I kept saying his name louder, and I think finally he just realized that it was a losing battle there. And once I understood, I was, I apologized, but I thought like I had said that this is what I was going to say when we were going over it. But I think maybe he assumed I was going to say El Mascarado. So
Okay.
I remember him being a little flustered about that. But as far as being a great guy, a great worker, and very helpful, Bert, awesome.
And we should talk about your gimmick itself, rewinding a little bit back further. So, how did you come up with the name Arch Kincaid, the intellectual? Kind of tell us about the gimmick and who was Arch Kincaid?
So, Archibald Montgomery was the name of a teacher, at the school I went to in ninth grade, St. George's School, and boys had to be clean shaven. And if he caught you and you weren't clean shaven, he would give you a dry shave. Just say, "Okay, I'm shaving you now." And it never happened to me, but I was just, really, blossoming into manhood. So it was just a name that struck fear in me, Archibald. And Kincaid, it comes from Jamaica Kincaid, the author of she is a woman, and the author of Caribbean literature, and she is an excellent writer, I'm told. I have never read anything by her, but one of my very good friends at Bates College, he wrote his senior thesis on her works. And I was like, Jamaica Kincaid, what an amazing name. So that's how the name became Arch Kincaid. The
Wow.
intellectual part, Rich Palladino, gave me that moniker.
Oh, okay, interesting. Awesome. And as far as the gear and the look of the character, how did that come about? Where did you purchase your gear from? Maybe early on it was just kind of makeshift, but as you went along, where did you get your gear from on a regular basis?
So the gear came from the bizarre bazaar of exotic Adrian Street.
Yeah.
Um, and the various sort of smoking jackets. I was always on the lookout at secondhand stores, whether if you'd see something. One I got on eBay, but the actual tights were always made once they were professional from exotic Adrian Street.
In one of your first high profile matches, you team up with April, and she would be April Kincaid. So it was
Mm.
April and yourself against Dawn Marie, Simon Diamond. This was 2001, same year you wrestled Burt. What are your memories of working with Dawn Marie and Simon Diamond, and obviously teaming with April?
Um, they were both great. I remember watching both of them in ECW, and I thought they were fantastic. Um, and Dawn Marie was very good also about indicating that there was stuff that she knew how to do, but that her training wasn't. totally extensive. So let's not do this or this, which is so good. You just, if you know what your limitations are or what you're comfortable doing and you lay it out, then there's never any problems. So I appreciated that she did that. And Simon Diamond was just great. I mean, I just sort of looked up to him and he put things together, and I think we executed it as best as we could. I think in the promo that I got to do before the match, I did accuse him and Don Marie of single-handedly being the reason why ECW had gone bankrupt and out of business. Unequivocally, it was, their fault.
And yet
Which
you've had
obviously
some.
is not true, but that was what Arch Kincaid was saying to
Sure.
try to ruffle their feathers, their dander.
And you've had some wonderful promos over the years. When it comes to a promo, what went into it for you? How did you kind of get there? How did you get to the finish line? And what would kind of help you put that together in your mind?
I would try to write things down if they came to me, just bizarre things that came into my mind. Uh, Relationships between automobiles being named, cougars or thunderbirds or firebirds, and was that machine power equivalent to the power of my opponent who decided to ascribe themselves wings or a thunder type gimmick and whatnot. So I usually, when there were some strange things that popped into my head, I would try to write them down so that I would have them. Um, but with promos, it's you just kind of do them, and sometimes they flow well, and sometimes they don't, and sometimes they're going well if your job is to generate heat. But because you have a combination of silence to people booing and telling you to stop, you sort of feel like, am I doing a bad job or am I doing a good job? Has this gone on too long? I really wish somebody would tell me if it had, and then I will, cut it and we'll get to the action. So, but mostly the promos were really the only reason that I had what little success I had in professional wrestling, was being smart and witty behind the microphone and coming up with creative and unusual things to say.
Any memories of working under Jamie and Randy Miller in those early days of chaotic wrestling?
They were great. They were very professional, and I think that a lot of people, because they were new, this would be Jamie and Randy Miller and Ben Lentini, and I believe Milo Masterson also had some role. So they were new. So I think some people who had been in the New England wrestling scene for several years just sort of thought of them as being who are these new guys who think they know how to run a wrestling promotion, but they were intelligent people and had common sense, which is sometimes lacking uh, in others involved in pro wrestling. You can't, I mean, good and bad way, but so they were just very professional, I would say, and um, it was definitely, they were great. And I do remember also the time when Randy Miller and Jamie went to Killer Kowalski's school to speak with Walter, and Walter kicked them out of the school. He was very upset at what they were up to. I don't know what exactly Walter had been told, but Walter liked to do things his way. But clearly, as the business was expanding, it needed to be a business as opposed to, just paying in cash. Because Mike Hollow and probably anybody else who had a role of an instructor, I mean, you're in a very, very dangerous business where even, doing everything absolutely the right way, something could go horribly wrong. And if that happens, you could, if you're not a business and you don't have an insurance policy, you could be sued for everything that you have. And I think Walter just thought of it in a in a way that it was just cash and don't get involved with that. And I think that led to a little bit of the bifurcation of the two entities for a while, but eventually it was resolved amicably. I think Jamie has some Polish roots, and that helped in sort of assuring Walter that everything was going to be fine, which it was
And somebody
eventually.
that you somebody you mentioned that you kind of bumped into at the wrestling school here and there. You would go on to wrestle in 2001, Mr. Dukes Dalton. You'd be in the ring with him for Chaotic Wrestling. What was it like working with Dukes?
Dukes was fantastic, very aware of my limitations in the ring. And, you know, I think I was paired with him with the idea that he would improve my skills because I could learn from him. And he was fantastic and a great guy. And another person, a little bit like Jerry Bowser, who they were wrestlers, but I had the sense that at least when I got there, that they were more going to be, trainers, and he was fabulous.
Now, being a part of Chaotic Wrestling as a regular, were you also kind of eyeing the competition, maybe watching some of the other local promotions, or were you just, head set on Chaotic Wrestling?
Well, Chaotic seemed to have a great promotion. They gave me a contract, which was a 9-month contract, and you got paid no matter where else you wrestled. And I hadn't wrestled too many other places. I had wrestled the year prior for Knuckles Nelson and Wrestling Star Wars, but Chaotic was running, events, maybe two a month, sometimes three, sometimes one. But with me needing to train at Killer Kowalski's, it just seemed like it was an excellent group to be affiliated with. And they also said, and we'll make sure that we prepare a package for you to send to Pro Wrestling Illustrated, so that you can be featured in the PWI 500, assuming that they deem that you've roughly made have the credentials or qualifications. And also, I put all these things in the contract. Obviously, they wanted you to go to the WWE, but I wanted to make sure that whether it was the WWE, WWF with an acronym change, with a letter change, WCW, ECW, derivatives of, uh, entities not yet quantified that are related to businesses of Vincent K. McMahon,
Covered all
Eric
bases.
yeah, Eric Bischoff, Ted Turner, ESPN Sports Classic, all these things. And they're like, okay, that's fine. You can put all of those in. If you have an offer from any of those entities, the contract, you can certainly break the contract, and we will happily break the contract with you. So once I did all of that, then I just felt really good.
Another person you'd lock it up with, 2001 for Chaotic Wrestling, was Andy Jax, another regular at that time. What was it like working with Andy?
He was very good, strong, good guy. I believe he formed a tag team later on, sort of a college kind of drinking gimmick.
Yes, I believe they were Kappa Tappa Kega.
Yeah, so he and his partner, just good, solid guys. Enjoyed working with them, relaxed, very easy. I mean, easy for me. I don't know if it was easy for them, but
Sure.
delightful.
And another individual that you had bumped into at the wrestling school was Vince Vicalo. 2002, you would go on to wrestle Vince Vicalo for Chaotic Wrestling. What was it like working with Vince?
Vince Vicalo was an excellent worker and very easy to wrestle with. He had the good time gimmick, and I think it really was less. The gimmick kind of consumed him a little bit. So there were times when I'm thinking, yes, we want to have a good time, but let's, have a wrestling match first before we start thinking about having a good time. So I think that may have hindered maybe some of his uh, progress, or maybe it gave me hesitation at some points, being in the ring or knowing that he might be always interested in having a good time. at all points in the day. And it's probably a little bit different if you're a rock star, because it doesn't matter when I mean, if you get on stage and you're horrible, maybe you get booed off stage and you give people money back. But when you really have people's lives in your hands, it's important to have a good time at the appropriate time.
And obviously, it's different for everybody. But for you personally, at what point did you start to really feel comfortable in the ring and you kind of stop doing the training on the side? You're like, all right, this is something I feel, freely comfortable doing now. I can handle it all. When did that point come for you?
So that point never came because
Okay.
I never stopped training. Um, I think maybe a lot of people probably did more shows, whereas I saw the benefit. After Killer Kowalski's the Chaotic Trading Center started, and then Walter was part of that, and they had class on Tuesday and Thursday nights and both Saturday and Sunday. And so certainly the Tuesday and Thursday classes I would always be at. And then if there was a show on the weekend, maybe not. But I just felt like I kept learning the basics and the actual physical wrestling, the components that the body needs to do, the
Yeah.
basic athletics, the most basic things remained really challenging for me all through my time wrestling. So I just sort of thought it was best to stick with that rather than saying, I'm fine and let me drive a really, really long way to go somewhere.
And that's a great opportunity. A lot of people don't have that opportunity to continue on with the training. And, you need that repetition because that repetition really helps you get along. And that's what's kind of difficult for some of the stars of today is, they've cut back on house show dates. So those house shows were very helpful in, that repetition and being ready for TV and being ready for the big time. And, I think it's a true you know art to keep it going, and that certainly helped you. So that's great. WWE Sunday Night Heat. So eventually
Okay.
you'd make it to Heat. This is a big deal. 2002, the Boston Fleet Center. Right here in New England. Nathan Jones. Now, obviously, an interesting, intense character, and obviously a completely different wrestling style. How did you adapt to working with Nathan in the ring? What was he like behind the scenes? And what did it feel like to enter the Boston Fleet Center on a grand scale like that when you're used to, obviously, at that point, just coming out for chaotic wrestling?
Um, so Nathan Jones, he was great, wonderful to talk to, very cerebral. He probably had a lot of time to read during his time of incarceration. I didn't even know anything about that at the time, but uh, obviously he's made such a great success of his life. Maybe not as much in wrestling, but in movies and just being really, he was a fantastic guy. That I know they wanted him to be a big monster and he needed to have some more matches. I think he had fought in that promotion that maybe had shows in Australia prior to going to WWE.
Yes, I think
Does
that was
that,
the WWA.
yeah. So we were to have a match and he was to look very imposing. Johnny Ace was the agent for the match, and there were a couple of things he wanted Nathan to do, and one of them was this sort of spectacular move where I think he picked me up by my shin or ankle and flipped me. It was just really spectacular, and I do recall that day him telling me about it. And Johnny Ace also said that it's a spectacular move, but just make sure you go over it very carefully this afternoon. So went to do a test run, and he said, we'll do it. We'll go on three, and it was one, two, and they did it at two, which was fine because he was so strong. But it certainly made me a little bit anxious going into the match. But the match was fine. Um, it was so cool to get to wrestle at the Fleet Center, and he is enormous. I mean, he's so big, so big. very good guy. And I couldn't believe I was wrestling at the Fleet Center. It was fantastic.
And kind of tell us how that opportunity came about for you. Was that a chaotic deal that, where they would send students there? Was that a Walter deal? How did that work?
So, Chaotix started having Dr. Tom Pritchard come and do camps. And then and also usually he might be on the show also as a referee. And he would see who was, it was a good chance for him to see who were the local guys that he thought they might want to do something with, and he would usually pick and just tell Chaotic who the guys were that he thought would be good to go to TV. And I was very lucky that I got to go a lot, maybe from 2002 through 2005. I was given so many opportunities to show my wares, however unique and flawed they were. So I couldn't have been happier. But it was Dr. Tom Pritchard.
And another regular that was a participant for Chaotic Wrestling for quite some time, Brian Black. He would go on to be a UPN executive, representative on SmackDown as Palmer Cannon. What was it like working with Brian Black in 2002?
So Brian Black was mainly wrestled in Maine, and then I remember he came to Chaotic, and I don't know who was feeling rambunctious in the Chaotic management, but he said something like, "Oh yeah, I go by Big League Brian Black," and I don't. Somebody said to him, "Well, you're not Big League here. You're just gonna be Brian Black or something." But he was really good, great guy. He got signed after a dark match, and the role that he had of Palmer Cannon, they also kind of thought of me as obviously I wasn't signed, but we did do a whole vignette at Jamie's office where I was a network executive, which was kind of cool. I think also just my dad was a lawyer for ABC, but he did work for a network, so I think I tried to think of some things that he might have said to be kind of a curmudgeon. But obviously, Brian Black was already in their system in Deep South Wrestling. So he got that gimmick, which obviously he did an excellent job for. And we saw him in Tommaso Ciampa and I did when we had our week-long tryout there. And then I guess I don't know exactly what happened there, but I think he was at a difficult point. He'd had a terrible trauma with his brother, and I think that culture there was probably pretty toxic, caustic at times with bullying, an insane amount of alcohol, and probably people who otherwise were good guys, but just being so absolutely annihilated, they just wanted to try to like beat, not maybe physically, but like beat the life out of people who had tons of potential. And so I think that he was just said, I've had it with this, which was probably a smart thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Get out of there while you're ahead. You don't want to get involved in any of that dark side of pro wrestling for sure.
Yes, there's a whole series, seasons on it, I believe.
There are, yes, exactly. Now, when it comes to trainees at the school, obviously you mentioned that John Walters, the Hurricane, was in the school at the same time you were. You would go on to work with John, Chaotic Wrestling, in 2003. John obviously has a great reputation in the ring. What was it like working with him one on one?
He's fantastic. Just so good at doing what he does, but also so good at assessing his opponents and knowing what they can and can't do and looking at things logically, and just an amazing, amazing wrestler and a really funny guy. And so with John, he was also my tag team partner twice in handicap battles against the Big Show when we got to go to WWE. And the first time that we saw him, at least I did when we were sitting down in the locker room to go over things, very nice, but your eyes sometimes wander and you're like, start looking at his hands and being like, wow, those are the hands of a big show, just huge. And but obviously you want to be listening and not, thinking that you're with a giant. And he said something like, don't worry, I'm not going to purposefully hurt you like Perry, Saturn, or Vader. And then kept going on with the match, and we're just kind of like, okay. And we continued talking, and it was all fine. And then John said to me, "Yeah, it was kind of odd that he said that he wasn't going to purposefully hurt us like Perry, Saturn, or Vader, because I just kind of assumed that, Arch, like." And I'm like, "Yeah, why would he?" So anyway, we had a little bit of trepidation just because of that, but he was fantastic, and we ended up wrestling him another time in a 2-on-1 situation. Very, very nice guy, and even a clip from one of our matches was on the Conan O'Brien show. And Conan was interviewing him, and they showed a clip. And I think it was him giving me a beel all the way across the ring. And then Conan said something funny like, "Don't worry, folks, that gentleman was okay." And then made like some funny face like that.
Wow.
But it was fantastic to get to work with him and be so high up in the sky when he choke slammed me. But John obviously would have been higher because he's such a great athlete.
Well, you mentioned that, Johnny Ace was the agent for the Nathan Jones match. Do you remember who the agents were for the Big Show matches?
I know for one of them it was Arn Anderson. And he was excellent. He was, very calm and parlayed the information in a way that we could understand and very relaxed. And he was a big hero of mine. My senior year in college, for Halloween, I was Arn Anderson. I had a Four Horsemen T-shirt that I cut off, and I don't know what I bought, but some sort of piece of plastic that I glued to my head, and then got, I don't know what it was, maybe some dog hair or something, because his hair was receding to try to get the whole look with the glasses. But it was such, because I loved the Four Horsemen, and being, looking like him like that. I didn't tell him this, that because I think probably to tell somebody that you're, getting dog hair from the one person in your house who has a dog to glue onto your head to resemble him, maybe he probably would have appreciated it, but we would have had to have a longer period of time to build up some camaraderie. So I didn't mention that, but he was one of my favorites of all time. So it was just so cool to have him talking to us and putting the thing together.
And you were also a part of a skit, kind of a fond memory for me. It was February of 2002, Providence Civic Center, Monday Night Raw, and you were part of a bar brawl with the APA, Billy and Chuck, and I was also a part of that scene. So I was in there with the chaotic locker room, and it was just a fond memory being a part of that. And I was a ring announcer at the time, not for Chaotic, but for some other promotions. And Randy was short one person because they had to stay back at the arena to wrestle. I believe it might have been Bob Evans, either Bob Evans or Damian Sandow. So it gave me an opportunity to, just kind of work with everybody and get that TV moment, and it was a lot of fun. But any memories from that skit earlier in the day or whatever it may be?
Well, first of all, although I remember so little, but I will say I remember you fondly.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. It may not be actually true because I don't remember really anything, too
Yeah,
much of, or anything. It was such a blur, and you're always getting hit in the head. But it would make
right.
sense that they would want somebody who's excellent like you to be part of the skit. And the only other person I remember being part of the skit was John. And we sat at the bar, and we were supposed to, I think the idea, it was men's night at the Friendly Tap. And I
Yes.
think the APA said, "Yeah, men's night. That's because we're men. We are men. We are man's men." But then it turned out that that meant that it was more of a same sex type of night at the Friendly Tap. So I think that what I did was pretty much I was a spectator, sitting at the bar, and I just remember for lack of thinking of something appropriate to say at the time, and I just started talking about all the time I had spent shopping and in Europe. and how shopping in Europe really was the best. Don't you think, John? And I don't know what he would say. Yes, Arch. And then I would, shopping in Europe is wonderful. All the capes and hats. And I just rambled on. That's what
Yeah.
that was. And then there was obviously a collision of bodies with Chuck and Billy. And maybe Rico, was he managing them at the time? I can't recall.
I believe he was, but he wasn't a part of the skit, though.
Gotcha. But it was a very big angle. I mean, national news with Chuck
It
and
was.
Billy,
Mm.
that they were going to be married. So that was very cool. Yes, that was the first time I got to do anything for the WWE. That was earlier in the year, and then later on, Nathan Jones. So that was cool. And also seeing Hulk Hogan and Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, who were backstage at the Providence Civic Center, and they are just enormous.
Yeah.
Enormous. I think at some point, you maybe, after you've been wrestling for, I don't know, maybe for me, a few more years, you lose a little bit the perspective of how big some people are, but then you see ones like the Nathan Jones, Kevin Nash, Big Show, and you're like, wow, these guys are enormous. They're giants.
Yeah.
And
My biggest memory from that day was they filmed part of the skit live on the air, but they also recorded part of it earlier in the day. They put them together to make it look like it was one piece. And I remember the VHS tape, which they were still doing VHS at that time. Got a police escort back to the Providence Civic Center, and I do remember them making a big deal about that to make sure that it safely got to back to the dunk. So, pretty funny
it,
memory there.
it's important for the city to be entertained and the country. So I
Yes,
can certainly see that happening. And I think, and the Friendly Tap was the bar owned by Tim White, right? The referee and the
exactly.
longtime also, colleague and executive assistant to Andre the Giant. Is that
Yes.
how? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I guess every
So
time he needed something fixed, they would basically trash the bar, and he would get everything, brand new. So that was a good way to do it.
that was a lot of fun.
So 2003, you'd work with Latin Fury Luis Ortiz, another person from the school during your time period. What was it like working with Louis?
Louis was great and very serious, and serious in a good way. Because I think in professional wrestling, the more preposterous, your appearance or maybe the moves that you're doing, and by that with Louis, I mean he had kind of a man bun ponytail in the middle of his head, and he had contact lenses, maybe of various colors. This isn't when he was the demon later on, and various odd beard, and so it's preposterous in a way, and also the moves that he did, which were so amazing. But the acrobatics. But when you do those types of moves and you have a get up that is kind of outlandish, you have to be very serious. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And that's why he was so exceptional. I mean, the more preposterous things are, the more serious you have to be. And he was so serious about his craft, and also very, very helpful at school. And I did watch the podcast that you had with Louis, and I know that he went over the incident with my ear. We had a match, and Louis did a spectacular flip, and I think it was just slightly off, so that rather than his caboose hitting the mat and his leg going over my chest, his caboose kind of went down the side of my head, and my ear wasn't off, but it was really dangling, so there was a lot of blood in that match, a little bit gory, and that can happen in at any moment. And I'm sure that I have probably done things, maybe not as bloody, but more. It was just an accident. So he said he thought that we had some sort of heat, but there was no heat on my part. And if I projected that, that might have just been because I think sometimes when people hear me talk, I sound serious. So maybe when I saw him again, I would say, "Hello, Louis. My right ear is excelling. My left ear is still recovering. And maybe he thought that was something just because I say these things, but I felt absolutely only great affinity for Louis, who was very helpful to me. But also that evening, I do want to give a great deal of thanks to Aaron Stevens, who did go to the emergency room with me. And I'm kind of a baby, and he, when they were doing the stitches, was very comforting to me. It'll be okay, Arch. I go, I know, but I just, just. And then I had to wear headgear for a little while after that, um, which, was different. I recall having a match with WWE. I think I was teamed up with Good Time Vince Vicalo against the 3 minute warning, and not Rosie, the other gentleman. I guess he slammed me, and I guess he said stay, and maybe I didn't hear him because I have the headgear on and my ears still. But such a long period had gone that it didn't see. I mean, I thought I had sold the move properly. So then I started eventually just, getting up. And then I look and he's in the air about to give me a knee drop or something. So, I mean, what are my choices? Am I going to roll back in and make everything look phony and take a knee drop, or continue getting up? So he missed. And boy, was he upset after that. Very, very angry. And kind of, I guess, I mean, a little bit maybe over the top and exerting his frustration upon uh, Vince Vicalo and myself. I know he was actually kind of yelled at after just because he was too rough on us, and I don't know whether anyway, one way or another. The other gentleman, Rosie, is the nicest person ever. But I think his partner may be just, maybe apt to be a little bit grumpy.
Yeah, his partner was Jamal. He went on to become Umaga. Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So you mentioned Aaron Stevens. Aaron Stevens obviously you said was in and out of the school while you were there, and he obviously is a caring individual. Accompanied you to the emergency room. You got to step in the ring with Aaron in 2003. So what was it like actually working with him in the ring?
Aaron, excellent. Very smooth and big, really big guy. I mean, maybe not, giantly muscular at the time, but you could tell so young and just very easy, knew what he was doing. Always knew that if things were going a little bit awry, which maybe they might tend to in a match with me, just, grab a hold and we'll get our bearings and everything will be fine. So fantastic. And I'm so happy that he got to achieve such great success as Damien Sandow.
Yeah, absolutely. He did a great job too. He was very over with the fans and just a great character. So the MCI Center, Washington. You were a part of WWE once again, 2003. This time one on one with Rico, who you mentioned earlier. Seems like such a nice guy. What was it like working with Rico?
Rico was fantastic. Very, just as you said, very, very nice guy. And I think the match was relatively smooth. I mean, I was trying to explain that my character also had some eccentricities to it, and he's sort of thinking, well, mine does definitely. So I said, well, I think it should be a delightful match. I think he slapped me on my rump, or maybe I slapped him on his rump, and then he maybe gave a look that perhaps that was something which he enjoyed, such a slap on the fanny. So there was maybe a little bit of back and forth like that, but very, very just nice guy, excellent. I think it was, fairly easy match to do, and a great experience. I do remember that before wrestling in Washington, we were supposed to get very, very elaborate licenses, which required lots of medical tests. And I think I was the only one who actually went through all of them. I think that Vince Vicalo and John Walters and maybe it was Chad Wicks maybe who went with us. They were just like, I'm not doing that, but I did. I went, got all the stuff for my heart and the head and all these different battery of tests, which I didn't need, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Enrico was such an interesting guy. He was on the police force in Arizona there. He was, of course, one of the American gladiators early on prior to his wrestling career and would end up joining the police force again post wrestling. But yeah, such an interesting individual.
And very, very good guy. And I think everybody always says he was a very good guy. And my experience was fantastic with him.
Yeah. 2003, that same year, you would go on to work with Handsome Johnny, another mainstay in chaotic wrestling, who would go on to do some great things as well. What was it like working with him?
Excellent. He was just such a natural and really identified with the fans back then, maybe as sort of a Dusty Rhodes type of character. And another, I mean, different than John, but somebody who knows what the limitations are of their opponent and is very good at assessing that. And maybe I had been wrestling longer than Handsome Johnny. Um, and so with John, I mean, John would just say, let's do this. And I'd say, yes, that's a good smart. But when you're a younger wrestler and maybe somebody's been wrestling as twice as long as you, and you have to put these ideas in a way that you think isn't going to hurt their feelings. Not that it would hurt my feelings that I have lots of athletic limitations, but he just could know how to put a match together that would make me look very athletic, which I appreciated. And a great guy.
Let's talk about fan interaction. Obviously you played the heel and you played it well, but when it comes to, either meeting fans or any interaction that you've had, whether it be in the building or out of the building, anything that stands out in particular throughout your career?
I don't think I've ever had a bad experience with a fan. I mean, not that I had many fans, but I all positive. Um, and yes, I was a heel, but I wasn't of the real heel. Who was the gentleman who was excellent now? MJF, and I think he apparently really is a heel in fan interactions and stuff, which is fantastic that he could do that. But even if I was a heel, I would just be like, "Oh, I see you want an autograph from me. That doesn't surprise me that you do. I can accommodate your wish. I know that you will." Treasure it because it's probably worth more than the value of your house or just think of random, but then in a nice way like that. But
Yeah.
all interactions were good.
Next on, you'd be WWE once again, the Hartford Civic Center, Hartford, Connecticut, another great spot in the New England area. And it was Rhino teaming with the late Sean O'Hare as they would take on yourself and Danny Doring from ECW. Any memories of that match?
So I have no doubt that what you're reading is correct, but he was not Rhino.
Ah,
It was who was the gentleman who was sort of vampire-like, not
yeah.
Gangrel, but
Mordecai or Kevin Thorne?
yes, yes. It was he was in the match, and that was okay. I think that was a match where they wanted them to look very strong and they were interested in looking very strong. So I literally, my memory of that is just maybe like a boot hitting me in the head, my head hitting the turn, I'm on the ground hitting the bottom turnbuckle, boot to the head. Just, I think they just destroyed us and there was not, the purpose of the match was not to have a competitive match, which was fine. But I think it was just pure destruction.
And
And I
that was a
think
velocity.
they were very interested in that this might be the thing that really clicks for them. So that was fine, which was uh, it was absolutely fine. It was odd though a little bit because I didn't view them as being given some of the other giants there. They were kind of mid-sized, I thought, and but they were wrestling as big guys in that match. And they may have just been trying that out because that's what they were told to do. So the match just wasn't very good, but I survived,
And that was a
and they did
velocity
too.
dark match as well. So You would go on to WWE again that very same year, teaming up with Bobby Roode, who was another up and coming star. That was on Sunday Night Heat against Hurricane and Rosie. So you said Rosie was a nice guy. You get that opportunity to
Amazing.
work with him again. What was that match like?
That was a really, I think that was a good match. Bobby Roode, very serious about his craft. And not that I'm not serious about my craft either, but sort of the or at that time, but some of the technical aspects of doing this and how it's done, he was very, very serious. And so I think I'm sure that we would have become great friends if we had had longer time to interact and he could have realized that my superficial buffoonery was just that, but it was a little bit, I think he was just saying, I'm probably the best wrestler out of Canada right now. They've seen me a few times. I'm a natural athlete. I'm a total student of wrestling. I sell amazing. This could be my chance to get a job. And they're putting me with this character who is very verbose and I don't know what he's saying. But anyway, I think it was a fine match, and obviously he was amazing. I mean, he almost wrestles a little bit. I know they say that, oh, and I know they say that the fellow um, who was the fellow that they say wrestles like Mr. Perfect
Dolph
now.
Ziggler?
Yeah, I thought Bobby Roode had a little bit of that, just that natural, just effortless, and so he was fantastic. I
And
mean,
he's
he was
actually
I don't think we worked that well as a team, but it was a great experience.
he's one of the trainers today, one of the agents. So still producer, they say. So still doing it today. So good to see that. So top three matches. If you had to pick three, who would you say your top three matches or opponents have been in your personal opinion over the years?
Well, one of my favorite matches ever was getting to wrestle Jimmy Superfly Snuka, which was somewhere in Maine. And I was a huge Rowdy Roddy Piper fan growing up. And just to be in the ring with him and tasked with antagonizing him and being a heel and beating him and trying to be vicious. By beating him, I just mean by administering punishment. It was just such a strange experience where for a moment sort of vicariously I felt somewhat like my inner hot rod. There was like a it was just amazing. But strange match a little bit because I had always up to that point discussed the matches with somebody beforehand. And so several times during the, maybe 3 hours before the show, I said, I'm over here if you want like to discuss something, but no pressure or something. And then would go away. And it's like, and then finally, really right when the show's going on, really right before we were going to go out, he invited me into the bathroom so he could have a cigarette, and we went over a few things. And then we had the match. And I was also appreciative of Aaron Stevens, who had wrestled him at an earlier date, who said, make sure that you bridge upwards, flex your biceps as much as you can, and get some good distance between your back and the mat when he jumps down on you for the Superfly Splash, because he really brings it. So knowing that, I was prepared, and it was such a delight to have that move put upon me.
What
So
would you say
that's,
is? Oh,
oh,
sorry.
go ahead.
I'll go. You can.
No, I was going to think of two other matches, but uh, let's go with your question.
No, you can continue that. That's
No,
that's
let's
great.
go with yours, Joseph. I'm
Well,
sure it's going to be superior.
I was just gonna ask you. You're working with so many different talents in the ring, different styles. How do you adapt as a pro wrestler? You personally, how do you adapt to the different styles in the ring?
Well, the good thing is that I'm not putting myself over like I'm some selfless person, but there was nothing as far as in-ring moves or spots that I wanted to do. There was never anything like, yeah, I want to do this or I really want to try that out. So I never had any of that because if I just getting to walk to the ring and whether I was given the opportunity to speak on the microphone or just talking as I go to the ring. That's all that I wanted to do. I mean, that got my character across, and that was the best that I would have. It was pretty easy to accommodate to other people. Um, Not that I was particularly big, but certainly in New England, being, in shape and maybe being, a little bit shy of 6 foot and, 210 or 215, but all muscle. It was pretty, I could, work with smaller guys. I could, catch them and do things. So I think make them feel safe that way. And with bigger guys, I could just sell pretty well. So I don't know. Again, I think I had a lot of great opponents who maybe adapted their styles to me. So I should feel very grateful about that. And the only thing that I brought was that I didn't have to do certain things. And I was very, very entirely indifferent on the outcome of the match. So having those two things, it wasn't like there was going to be too much friction, even though my capacity for the acrobatics was limited.
And continuing on with that initial question, you mentioned Jimmy Snuka. Who would the other two be if you had to pick?
Um, Max Bauer and myself. We had a series of tag team matches with the Logan brothers, and they were just fantastic. Again, guys that could really assess what their opponents could and couldn't do. And I remember them talking to me and saying, Arch, do you think that if we did a triple leapfrog, do you think you'd be able to get through? And I said, and they're like, they said, we think you can. We definitely think it. Based on our assessment, I said, "Oh, you think it?" So we practiced that beforehand, and it worked. And then it worked on the show, and they were just great to work with. Fabulous as far as contests of peers versus Jimmy Superfly Snuka not being a peer. I mean, a peer, but a superstar.
Sure. And
Um,
third option there.
a third option for wrestling, I think that the Logans were absolutely the best in the latter part of my short career, and in the earlier part of my short career wrestling, John Walters, just because he'd make me look so athletic and smooth, like I was a very polished wrestler, even though I was not.
And in your experience being in the wrestling business, what would you say is the greatest challenge of being in the wrestling industry?
So I think the biggest challenge is that when you are doing something where the possibility of injury is very, very high, and you could get injured at any moment, and also an industry that is somewhat more catered to being young. Not if you become a big star, I think, and then you can don't need to do certain things. So it's the pressure knowing that when you're starting, you're young or you're whatever age you are, and that there is a chance that an injury could end your career at any time, that you really, really want to make it, whatever that is for you, usually making it to the WWE. So you can, some people, I think, and certainly myself at times, you can be very short sighted. And it's sort of a battle because your fear that you're going to get injured or you're going to get older is real. It's a real fear. So almost the day that you start wrestling school, you're fighting this battle with yourself. Like, I need to make it now. I have been wrestling for 3 weeks, but I need to make it now. And that is kind of the right feeling to have, but it can also lead to some very short-sighted decisions that certainly probably I made and other people make, and they're not looking at it like, okay, who are my heroes? They've been wrestling for a really long time. and I want to not just make it, I want to have a long career. And they seem to be 20 years into this and they're still wrestling. So maybe I should just kind of think what their model is, or just relax a little bit and not be so short sighted sometimes.
Sure. What would you say is the best piece of advice that you've received?
I think Mike Hollow gave me a lot of excellent advice. Just that the only thing you have in the business is, well, two things: your name and your body. But your name is even more important than that. So if you agree to do something, you make a commitment, you need to fulfill that commitment. Now, maybe there's some extravagant circumstances that prevent you from doing that, but you do that. And also, if your assignment is to uh, be defeated, do the best you can to really make your opponent look great. And once you start getting into this idea that you're upset that you're going to be losing, so you want to lose but look really strong and have it, people see that, and it comes through, and then that will hurt your reputation. And then also, just, I mean, your commitments. If you say you're going to do something, you do it. And I mean, nothing that you don't agree to anything you wouldn't want to do, but if you've made that commitment, you fulfill your obligation. And your name is the only thing you have, and your body too. So have some common sense. If there's something that you're not able to do or you feel uncomfortable to do, just don't do it.
And of course, you're bouncing from venue to venue. Did you have a favorite venue to wrestle out of over the years?
Um, well, early in my short career, Chaotic ran some shows at the Wonderland Dog Track Ballroom, where ECW had run shows, and that
Right.
had such a cool kind of psychedelic vibe to it, of a nightclub maybe out of Total Recall of the 80s, or something futuristic but 80s style. And wrestling there was really, really cool. And then for Chaotic at the Polish American Veterans Club was where where we had most of our matches there. So I really enjoyed that venue also. Um, but something about that dog track ballroom was very trippy and unusual and peculiar. And so I really enjoyed the few shows that they had there.
Yeah, I remember being at a show there.
Though I am against dog racing, and I'm happy that that's no longer a thing, at least not in Massachusetts that
Right.
I know of.
Yeah. Yeah, Ricky Steamboat was a part of a chaotic show there, and I think that was in 2000. But yeah,
And
fond
I think,
memories of that venue. Great place.
yeah, and I think that was where the Simon Diamond Don Marie match, where I teamed with April, also occurred. So it's just
Okay.
a cool venue, a very cool venue.
So Mount Rushmore, getting into Mount Rushmore, chiming in your inner fan, who would your personal Mount Rushmore be of the wrestling business, any era?
So I would put Bruno Sammartino as on the Mount Rushmore. While I didn't see him when I was little, he was always kind of there looming in in the background in WWF. And then you would watch some old Coliseum videos and you saw him wrestle Larry Zbyszko, and you realized all the other people that he wrestled and that he really was the business there. So Bruno Sammartino, Rowdy Roddy Piper, Ric Flair, and I'm going to say Ricky the Dragon Steamboat also. And maybe that may be a little bit of an unusual choice, but just so many people, like my father, when they saw him wrestle, they were like, "Wow, this he could be an athlete of any caliber, amazingly," and it gave them a whole new perspective, which I think on pro wrestling. So he's definitely on the Mount Rushmore. San Martino, Piper, Flair, Steamboat.
It's a great lineup. So, what advice do you have for somebody that's looking to get into the wrestling business now?
I would, if you have the opportunity, I would go to college first. I wouldn't start very young, because or do something, whether it's college or going into the military or going into the Peace Corps, or get into excellent shape, but don't enter pro wrestling until you're, maybe 21 or 22. And I just think that there's a period in people's lives, and maybe not everybody has this, but where they're apt to do destructive things or act, in a youthful way. And you want to be with people kind of your same age with some sort of structure when those things might come out, rather than being in a world that is really an adult world before you've had too many experiences to kind of maybe know how to handle that a little bit better.
So 2003, you'd find yourself in the Boston Fleet Center once again for the WWE, and you'd work Brian Danielson, one of the greats in the ring. What was it like working with him early on?
Well, it was a very basic match, and I think it was pretty good. I remember John Walters telling me that he had just spoken with the American Dragon, who had asked him what he thought we should do in the match between, and John said, "Wow, I really don't know what you could do with him." He was kind of joking, but I think that maybe Brian Danielson was expecting that his opponent, it might be a real technical back and forth kind of classic for that style of wrestling, but it wasn't going to be that way with me. But he, being excellent, quickly, once he knew that, put things together, and we said the best way to start the match, because you have this reputation from this Ring of Honor where perhaps everyone shows great respect. I will offer my hand out to you to start the match, and acknowledging that. And then when you put your hand out to shake, I will go like this through my blonde hair, and just very basic. But then he shined, and it was very easy, and he was very professional.
Ken Phoenix, Broadway Ken Phoenix, 2003. He'd wrestled Ken for Chaotic Wrestling. Of course, he'd go on to become Kenny Dykstra of the Spirit Squad. What was it like working with Ken?
He was excellent, very young. I mean, started wrestling very, very young, and but was big. And but I remember in our match, he put a lot of thought into the match about what we could do and what are some things that I could do to make me look good, and vice versa, and just very professional and very good. And it didn't surprise me that he achieved, great stardom early on, because he was good and looked like a pro and was a pro.
In 2004, you'd appear on WWE Velocity. It was at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Uncasville, Connecticut. Your opponent that night was Billy Kidman, who's
Hmm.
now an agent, of course, retired from the ring. What was it like working with Billy?
I enjoyed that match very much. I'm I'm a pretty hard hitting wrestler if the other wrestler is going to be hard hitting. And I think at that time, although he could still do some amazing athletics, I think he was getting bigger, and the focus was on him being less of a cruiserweight and being a kind of a serious heavyweight. And he wanted to have a hard hitting match. And that was fine with me. So I think we hit each other, with clotheslines and whatnot, as absolutely as hard as we could. And it was a good solid match. He was great, very easy. I think some people said, "Oh, but he came close to getting you on what is the finishing maneuver that he did?" But
Shooting Star Press?
maybe, and I think somebody said that it wasn't necessarily a wrestling expert or wrestler, and I said, "No, it always is that close. That's the beauty of it." But he
Right.
was fantastic.
You're also in a great triple threat match for the EWA. So I'm assuming this must have been based out of Maine. And it was with Johnny Heartbreaker and Todd Hansen. Triple threat. What was it like working with them together?
Well, Handsome Johnny, as I keep referring to him, Evar, fantastic, very easy. Um, Johnny Heartbreaker, also excellent. Not probably as naturally fluid as Handsome Johnny as a worker, but made up for it by having such a great appearance and being so disciplined about his appearance. I mean, for me, I could do all of the training. I mean, all the weightlifting and get all of the protein that I needed. But he was very disciplined. He's one of the first people that I saw who had very regimented. I know exactly how much chicken I'm consuming and at different times of the day. And later on, I saw that sort of same mindset out of Tommaso Ciampa. But it's a whole different thing when you're not only lifting weights, but you're just disciplined and you have this plan, realizing that if I eat all of that, I'm going to not have abs, and I'm more apt to get a job if I have abs. So he's just very serious and a great guy. And really, he also he also gave me another cool opportunity because he was working for WWE for a period of time while he was wrestling before he got signed, and there was a show maybe in New York or Connecticut, but we met up and I got to work out at Titan Towers because he worked, and that was so cool. So that was
Wow.
one of the most amazing things to just get to do. So great guy, and had a good maybe short run there with the Promise Antonio Thomas, but they made it and they'll always be remembered fondly. And so I'm so happy that he had that opportunity.
Absolutely. Also in 2004, you'd work with one of the vets of New England wrestling in Maverick Wild. What was it like working with Mav?
Maverick, a excellent worker. Um, and that was, I want to say we had a dog collar match. We have had some other ones, but I do remember having a dog collar match with him. And, he was very cognizant of the chain of and also fine with the fact that I didn't want to bleed. I never bled and unless it happened. I just didn't think it was a safe thing to do. And even though in that match I did sort of, think about, but Rowdy Roddy Piper and Greg the Hammer Valentine and that brutal, bloody dog collar match. But I'm just like, no, it's really not worth it. So he said that's no problem. And I think for that type of match, it was good. But I mean, he was just a spectacular worker, like a John Walters or a Handsome Johnny. I mean, different body type than Handsome Johnny, but so maybe more. He's like a Tommaso Ciampa, Maverick Wild, John Walters. That just fantastic.
And Chaotic in 2004, maybe even a little prior, would go on to have a working relationship with Jim Kettner and the ECWA. So, you'd see some of the ECWA talent kind of mix in with Chaotic and vice versa, and you would go on to the ECWA and you're working with some of the well known talents there, but it's a whole new crop of talent for you. What was it like working with guys like the Japanese pool boy and Mr. Ooh La La and people that were well established in the Delaware territory?
That was a lot of fun, and I remember those trips also fondly. Uh, Early in my short career, we would often stay at Gary Michael Capetta's house if I was with John, and then later in my short career, if I was with the Logan brothers and Chase Del Monte, we would stay at Chase's house in New Jersey on the way. So that was fun going down there, and Jim was extremely professional, and I think he had the connection with Bill Apter, and not Bill Apter, yes, Bill Apter, the great wrestling journalist.
Yeah.
And there was an article about me in Pro Wrestling Illustrated, a 2-page thing, which was so cool, which he got that for me. And just very professional, and there were certain guys there who you could tell were going to be big stars, and then there were other ones who were very happy being established in that territory and loved wrestling and just loved it. So it was a great mix of talents, and it was a lot of fun to go down there and get to wrestle for him.
2004, you'd appear on another Sunday Night Heat for WWE. This time with Danny Doring, you guys would team up against Rhino and Tajiri, the famous Madison Square Garden. What was it like being a part of the world's greatest arena?
That was a great feeling. And I remember that Dr. Tom Pritchard, who had, got me booked for that show, he got released at that time. I mean, I was booked on that show, and then he got released. I think it was something to do with perhaps Johnny Ace, I don't know, maybe wanting him to wear a suit all the time. And he's like, but I'm the trainer. Yes, but you should still be. I don't know what it was, but he was gone there for a while. And then um, Tommy Dreamer took over kind of in that role. And I don't think I had met him even before, but he, you know, he was the one who I think put the match together. I mean, said that I could be in that match. Maybe he had talked to Dr. Tom about me, but for him to say like, okay, you're going to team up with Danny Doring, and you're going to face Rhino and Tajiri, who were huge ECW stars, Danny Doring also, and wrestle in Madison Square Garden. Like I couldn't be more grateful to Tommy Dreamer for just executing or saying or giving me that chance. I will always feel a great debt of appreciation to him and to Dr. Tom. And I don't know if they talked or it was just random, but what a cool thing. And to be from, the New York area and to wrestle in Madison Square Garden. It just to have done that was fantastic.
You'd also appear that same year, Denver, Colorado. Rosie and Hurricane, once again, this time against you and
Denver,
John Walters.
Colorado.
Yeah.
I don't think I have wrestled in the Rocky Mountain State.
Really? Wow. Okay.
No, 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 Joseph. So
Interesting.
that must be an erroneous report from the internet
Oh, my goodness.
about a match appearing in Colorado. But I think the match that you were saying occurred. Who were the combatants?
It was Hurricane and Rosie, once again, against yourself and John Walters.
I think that was an excellent match. Hurricane was great, so funny, so smart, and Rosie I really liked. Really liked him. So I think it was just a good, easy match. I'm sure that we were heels and they were baby faces, and they defeated us with some back and forth and a lot of fun.
I thought it was odd that you traveled to Denver for the gig.
Yes, because I would imagine if I knew something, an endeavor of that was coming up, I would have said I need to start training extra hard, my respiratory capacity, and how am I going to perform in the Rocky Mountains? But no, I've never performed in Denver, Colorado,
So if you had to
or
choose
anywhere in
one,
Colorado.
yeah, if you had to choose that one moment in your entire pro wrestling career, obviously, like you said, it was short, but you accomplished a lot. So in that period of time, if you could pick one moment, whether it be in or outside of the ring, but within the wrestling industry, what would that one moment be for you personally?
I think that first match for the WWE, that dark match against Nathan Jones, because um, I mean, I hadn't been wrestling for too long. We call it, 2.5 years, but I did probably everything you can possibly do to be as focused on pro wrestling as possible. And things which might have scared other people, that scared me certainly, like some things, the basic acrobatics, but then also knowing that you're going to do battle, obviously, simulated combat with a legitimate giant, and you don't necessarily know that they're not going to do the move when you say 1, 2 versus waiting to 3, but just being like, I'm fearless and having that moment. I think that was my favorite moment.
Two other matches that would pop up in 2005. You'd appear in Boston once again, not Colorado, for Sunday Night Heat with the WWE against Tyson Tomko, one on one. And then, of course, you'd be in a tag team match with Scotty Charisma against London and Kendrick on Velocity, and that was in Springfield, Massachusetts. Any memories from those matches?
So I do remember the Tomko match, and I think that he defeated me via countout, which was a little bit unusual. Um, I think I was maybe sitting on the top rope, thinking I don't know what happened. I think he knocked me out of the ring, and won by countout. And I do remember, he was great to work with. But then I also remember being backstage, and or in the back, and maybe Chris Jericho knew my name and maybe he told it to Chris Benoit, but then I remember Chris Benoit coming over to me and saying like, "Hey Arch, I just wanted to talk to you for a moment. You did a great job there. We've really been trying to make Tom Coe look vicious. And you did an awesome job. He really, really looked, that was one of the times we were trying to make him into a vicious big man, and you did a great job, and
Mm.
thank you so much." And he was thanking me, and he shook my hand, and I was like, wow, that's the best wrestler uh, out there said that. So that was just kind of I was like, oh, wow, that's cool.
It's a great compliment. So let's talk about your book. You've recently become an author. Let's hear all about it. Fagin of Hoboken and the Horseshoe. There it is. And let's hear all about it. How did this journey start for you as far as writing a book, and tell us all about it and where fans can purchase it.
Well, fans can purchase it anywhere, really. I mean, you can purchase it on Amazon, Walmart, Target. Another thing that I encourage people to do is just go to their local bookstore. They won't have it, but bookstores have a lot of cool stuff. And you say, "I'd like to order Fagin of Hoboken and the Horseshoe. Is there any way you can get that text for me and I'll get it for you?" Um, Also, the audio book is on Spotify and Audible, basically all the places that you could find a book. I started it as my master's thesis when I was getting my master's in history at Salem State. And it's about the mayor of Hoboken, New Jersey during the 1890s. And it was a time when there was an epic, apocalyptic, really steamship fire where 300 people plus died, which was awful. And also a time of anarchists. And I don't know, the thing about history, which is nice, and I'm not going to speak about things going on right now, but maybe like 20 years ago when we were really worried about terror and there were explosions or anthrax, and everyone's like, "Oh, I can't believe that this is going on." And we're like, well, this has happened before. We had anarchists 100 years earlier, so sometimes it makes you feel a lot better about things to just have that perspective. Um, the featured character, Lawrence Fagin, he is also my great grandfather, and I knew nothing about him. So I became interested in the book. I'd been a couple of years out of wrestling. This was March of 2010, and I had an interview in New Jersey at the Morristown Beard School. And the interview was kind of going decent with the back and forth, but then there was that like one awkward, not awkward, but there was just a pause. And sometimes a pause is fine. Just let it pause. But I just blurt out, I go, "And my great grandfather was the mayor of Hoboken." And the guy's just sort of like, "Okay." And his name, he was of an Italian background, Mascaro. And his eyes lit up, and he was like, "Did your great grandfather know Frank Sinatra?" And it's crickets on my part, and I don't know what the crickets are for facial expression, but just nothing. And then he looked at me, and I was sort of saying, "Oh, I don't," and then he goes, "Well, when was your great grandfather the mayor of Hoboken?" And I might have said something like, "Oh, it had to be a really long time ago." Like, I mean, that was it for the interview. I mean, it was so. Why do you mention something and you're in New Jersey and you try to throw something in that you think is going to help you somehow, but it ended up backfiring. But it ended up, the long process of writing the book. And it took a long time with lots of stops and starts, but I'm very, very happy that I finished it.
Awesome. Why don't you show us again the cover there? There it is, Fagin of Hoboken and the
And it's
Horseshoe.
available as an audiobook too, I mentioned, recorded by me.
Excellent.
Uh, so that's another way if you want to hear um, Well, who does? I'll just say that it's available in audio, and that was a great experience too, recording a whole audio book. And I think it's 6 hours of listening time. And what they say is that that usually takes about, for every 1 hour that you record, you're probably in the studio for 3 hours, and that was pretty much the case. I recorded it in Rhode Island at the Mobile Mic Studios. There's a fellow there named Spike Katz, and he has a great operation. So if anybody is thinking that they want to record their audiobook or not, he's a great person to work with.
Well, I look forward to reading it myself. I've got a copy thanks to you, so really greatly appreciate that. And we wish you much success on the book, and look forward to see what comes about with it.
Joseph, this was an absolute delight. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be on your show, and congratulations on making so much cool content. I mean, you're documenting the history of pro wrestling, but with a New England emphasis. And somebody will write books and will refer to these interviews, and could be in the future. So that's so awesome. So congratulations on doing that.
Greatly appreciated. It's been awesome to have you here, and I'll end it the way I always do. Looking back many years from now at your career as a whole, what do you want your legacy to be? How do you want to be remembered?
I just want to be remembered, and I was memorable, even though it was a short career. And I think that some people will remember me. And so, first of all, you have to be remembered. And then after that, that probably I followed kind of maybe Mike Hollow's words of wisdom of that the only thing you have is your name and your body, and you need to protect those. So um, I think that looking back, I mean, I'm just happy to be remembered, but probably remembered more fondly than not, or at least I'd like to think it's that way.
Absolutely. Arch, thank you so much for joining us. For Arch
Thank you,
Kincaid, I
Joseph.
am Joseph Bruen, and this has been the All Access Entertainment Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your comments. Love to hear from you, the fans, of course, and what you thought of this episode. Don't forget to pick up your copy, Fagin of Hoboken and the Horseshoe.
And
So
the
keep that up.
horseshoe.
Absolutely. And we'll see you all